Welcome to the Self-Aware Leader. I'm Ron Oltmans with Lead Skill, and this is our first live stream of 2023. So it's January 11th, and I just want to welcome everyone who's watching this live and in replay for those of you who are joining us later after the event. And today, what I want to talk about and share with you is the year ahead. The approach that a leader takes to planning, and a special kind of planning that honestly I find that we don't think enough about. So anyone who's been in business for a while and enjoyed a certain level of success typically has some kind of a plan for their business or for the operation, whether we call it a business plan, whether we do it the annual budget, a strategic plan, or even like, okay, I have a rough idea, a goal of how we want to grow business this year versus last year. What I find lacking, though, among leaders is some real careful thinking about their own life, about like a plan for myself, how I'm going to grow as a leader, and looking at the past year, the lessons learned, and then planning for the year ahead. Kind of like keeping the lines clean between who I am as a person, as a leader, and the business itself. And what we tend to do is give the business a lot of attention and not give as much focus to ourselves. And so what the year ahead is about is really a personal planning process. You can take it and apply it to your business if you don't have something like that already in place. But I really recommend you start with the personal, you start with yourself first. And so that's where this comes from. Let me give you a little bit of background. I started my own planning over 20 years ago, and it arose out of a need for myself just to get organized. And because I would set goals, but I'd also be frustrated not accomplishing all of the goals that I wanted to. And I just needed to get myself better organized in my thinking and just put it out on paper. And so I went through different systems. Eventually, I came up with something which I'm going to share with you today called the Year Ahead. And I've been using this for over 12 years. And finally, in 2022, I published my workbook. I shared it with the world and said, hey, this has been helping me for a while. Maybe it will help you too. And so I'm really wanting to lead this conversation to help you as a leader to set your own plans, set your priorities for the year ahead. And what I find that we do is, if I give you that directive, and explain the rationale why you need to do that, and if you buy into it, what will happen is you'll just start setting your goals and plans for the coming year, kind of like I did over 20, 25 years ago. And you may miss some things. And if you want to make it a learning process for yourself and kind of retrace your own steps, make your own process, that's fine. But if you want to learn some things like I have and maybe shorten the learning curve, I'd recommend the Year Ahead process. Because here's what I found. If I don't take time to reflect on the past year, what I tend to do is repeat the same things, the same patterns. I repeat my successes sometimes, but I also repeat my mistakes. And I just find that having questions that help me reflect on what is really what stands out from the past year, and then go a little bit deeper and reflect on who am I as a person and as a leader? What's my purpose? And then from that foundation, if I'll set goals for the next year, I have like a clear direction to set, and it's really helpful. So there's my introduction to this whole process, and I'm going to just invite Angela, who's with me here, to join in the conversation. And I wanted to bring her on here for a second. Hi, Angela.
Hello. I'm
So,
just
yeah, you've been kind of a witness from the sidelines for a while as I've done the Year Ahead process. And in this past year, I
yeah.
brought you into it and introduced it to you as well. And I wanted to just briefly get your take on what this is like. We'll do that in a second, but let me just maybe lay out for those watching. There are several different ways you can go through this process. So I mentioned already, I put the workbook out. It's on Amazon. It's on our website at leadskill.com, and you can find, more details. One advantage about going to our website, going to leadskill.com and buying it from our store, is I have it in not just a PDF format, but also as a Word document, which you can easily convert to Google Docs as well. And that allows you to do your own editing and just typing in your answers and, kind of compose your own document, your own version of the year ahead, which is what I want people to do ultimately. If you buy it on Amazon, they don't have that feature. It's just going to be basically like in an ebook format. And then you need to get a journal, a bullet journal, which we have some of those in our store too. And we've got journals on LeadSkill. We've got Angela has journals that she's designed on simpledailyjoystore.com, bullet journals that then you can, just take notes on, answer the questions, and make it your own process. And so you could go and just do the workbook on your own. This is the DIY version of the program. And then a second way to do this would be walk through it with coaching. And I don't know of other coaches who can support you in that. So I would say, maybe it sounds self-serving, but hire me. I can walk leaders through this in some individual coaching, and I'll reflect on some of that with you in a second about some of the lessons learned from other leaders who have hired me and that we've done this together. And then a third way is through a coaching group, which is working with other people as a cohort, as peers, to support one another with a facilitator. Again, I'll facilitate it, but it's kind of got the group dynamic to it. And there's some things you can get from that are a little different from the one-on-one. So there's different ways that you can do this process. And so let's step back. Angela, you did this kind of without much guidance from me. There wasn't like individual one-on-one coaching, that sort of thing. It was the DIY version, I would say. What was your experience of this like?
So first of all, I was just curious around this live. So we're gonna, off script, on script, So what I'm present, before I answer your question, I was curious. I'm gonna throw the question back at you. Was like, when you say you've done this a number of years, and my question was, when you first in 2020, did you have an intention to start a YouTube channel? Was that part of your year ahead plan?
Yes, that was one of the goals that I had for the year in January 2020, when I started. When I sat down in 2019 and thought about that.
So I want to just acknowledge you for that, because as I was looking at this visual again, and I remember we decide what text goes into the visual as I create the one for you. And you said, set yourself a direction in 2023. And of course I have other visuals that with different lines in the visual. And I was just very present to that, because of the planning you did back then, you really launched our business into a new direction. While everybody was learning how to pivot to using Zoom, and everything digital online, you went into this space of creating a YouTube channel for your business. I remember, it was like, what I was asking are you being a YouTuber here? And I realized that the thought and the thinking that you put into your business was that one of the things was that you were really setting yourself a new direction in business. Yes. And this was how it helped you. So for me, you've done this many times. I am looking at because where I am in my life, I'm looking at what's going on, what's my next chapter. So this is how it's helped me. So that's a very short answer to your question.
Okay. Did you find that the questions helped you out to get clarity as you went along, or were there hiccups, bumps on the road as you were going through it, or some parts that didn't completely serve you? I mean, I honestly, I welcome, honest feedback. And so if you've got, any knocks on it, that's fine too. I mean, this is not just promotional. This is really to help leaders think through how they can really take some me time, take personal time, prioritize that, and not just like stumble in headlong into another year, just focusing on their business and kind of putting their own kind of personal desires, motivations, needs to the back burner. I mean, to me, that's kind of the essential part of being a self-aware leader is you start giving more awareness to yourself and prioritizing and kind of, like you are an important part of anything that you do in life. And if you want to have a better quality of life, if you want to have a better business, you got to give more attention to yourself in the process too. So the question for you was just the process of going through what was helpful, what wasn't so helpful. If you can just give, maybe it's like a live review. I didn't prep you for this well, so people are just going to get kind of the frank and honest gut reaction.
When you sent me, because I was responsible for all the final details of this particular ebook, and so I am very pleased that I was able to get on. Like for example, when I add this work, like for example, this one is going to stay with me, about writing my next chapter. I found that just working on it, I was forced to think about the year ahead for me. What will spring look like, summer, fall, and December? So I'm a very visual person. And so just the words, the year ahead, I would think about it often, like, what's the year ahead? The questions in the book was very helpful to, it was very helpful because I got to use a journal and write about my answers to those questions. And then as I thought more about creating my chapter, my year ahead, I found myself returning to, what's inside, deep inside. And that's why I have my life purpose quote here. That it's hard to, that self-awareness is a journey. So I don't know if I'm the best candidate to give you the best review, but what I gotten was just a simple year ahead thing, just a simple year ahead. The words year ahead got me thinking. And the conversations I had with you thereafter about what I was present to, my responses to questions were very helpful to me as well. And when just now in the live conversation, you talk about how, you can have repeated success, but you can also have repeated habits that do not serve you. So one of the habits that do not serve me is it's doing things too intensely. It's not happening. People will be like, but that's great, you bring passion to the work, but sometimes it's very costly because I do not know how to self-regulate my energy. And that's very costly because I could give it all and then I end up feeling really exhausted and fatigued. I think so when the conversation of burnout came about, it was like, yeah, I experienced that a lot,
Yeah.
even before the pandemic, where I take on where I take on things, or when things come my way that's new, I would still tackle it on. We can do this. And then I would go all out with passion and energy and full force. And then I would burn out. Our
Yeah.
colleagues would repeatedly tell me, like, you got to slow down, you're going to burn out. This was
Yeah.
even before pandemic. And I'll be like, okay, but I was still burn out. And so now at this point, I'm like, oh, when the collective humanity is burning out, I was like, and then I was thinking about, oh, so as I think about the year ahead, I was like, okay, this is a pattern, a habit that I need to change. Have a new one. So when you have this one coming that you also rolled out last year, and I believe it's on Amazon as well, right?
Yes.
Because I have it on Etsy, and also on our website. I this was very useful to me. So
Okay. Good. I'm
yeah,
glad. And that's really the purpose. That's one of the things that I was, intending and bringing this out for a wider audience, beyond just my private or individual coaching clients, is, how do we add a little more mindfulness to our personal planning? And, the year ahead, even though I didn't initially begin it this way, so well thought out, with that sort of conscious intention, but what I saw over time is the year ahead is really kind of it's like an extended mindfulness exercise applied to the personal planning process.
yeah,
So there's different systems, different, methods, processes that, self-help people teach of how you can do your personal planning. I mean, there was one that I knew uh, over 20 years ago called Your Best Year Yet. I think Jenny Ditzler, wrote a book on it and had a whole system behind it. Other people like Michael Hyatt, and, there's a lot of different systems of how to plan, like an annual plan for yourself. And they all have merits that, they're good. And I have looked for how to bring more mindfulness to that, to where it's not just a planning process, but it's
yeah.
an opportunity for self-reflection and personal growth.
You've told me good things about your coaching group, and also I just found that even this morning in our conversation, it was very helpful when you mentioned, because I was like, okay, I want to have a new habit, so I started downloading this thing called Stress Scan from an app, and I've been working on it this last couple of weeks, just tracking my stress level at different times, and and I'll be like, oh yay, I'm low stress. Oh whoa, why am I high stress here? and then and then because I've been doing this for a while, and I started talking with you this morning before, get some coaching from you, and I was present to that. I was more caught up with the thought, all the thoughts that came from all the analysis that came from my stress scan results, and you helped me quickly untangle those thoughts. It's good to be aware, but don't let the thoughts catch you like a fish in a net where you feel trapped. And so that's where I found I just find it so exciting. I just can't help giving you a shout out, because I find it's very useful. You try to meet the market at 3 different levels where people can, if they want DIY, they can just have the book, and this is helpful. I'm not even done. If I was telling you, I said, if I'm an AP student, I would give myself a C, because all my stuff is in my document I'm working on. It's like the grammar's wrong, everything is all over the place, and I've been still working on it, but I'm not even turning a paper, using the questions that you have, because I'm still sorting it out. That's how long the process could be. And I'm so excited that I'm not having to turn it in within 2 days. I'm giving myself grace to work on it month, you know.
Let me
And
let me go ahead and
yeah.
give a quick preview of just what is in those, kind of the process. I I feel like I mentioned it in, just very briefly, but maybe it would be helpful to give just a little more detail for people.
Mm.
I don't know how well you can read this, but the year ahead is really made up of a set of 12 questions, and they're arranged in a certain order so that the first 4 questions really help you to look back at the past year, the year that you've just completed, and to take time to celebrate the accomplishments or achievements, and also to acknowledge the disappointments, the things that didn't happen that you were hoping were happen, or that you'd set as goals or expectations in the past year. And then to also reflect on some of the people you've met, some of the things you've read, courses you've taken, podcasts, videos, things that have fed you, that have given you, some something to reflect on your life experience. And then to capture all of those different inputs as lessons learned. What have I gained from this past year as far as lessons learned? What is life teaching me? That's the first kind of chapter, first, step of the process, first 4 questions. The next 2 questions, the second step of the process, is really looking at the present moment and going deep into looking inside myself. Like, what am I learning about myself, who I am, and what are my strengths, my weaknesses, my motivations, my values, just all of the different things about um, me as a person, and how I am coming to greater self-awareness. And so looking inside is really key. And the sixth question in this, which is really, drilling down to the core, is who am I? What is my worth? What I've got roles that I fulfill as a business person in my personal life, and just all the different roles. But apart from those roles, who am I? Like, how do I answer that question? What is my basic makeup? What is my purpose in life, in fact? And I'll share in a moment more about how I had a very interesting conversation with someone going through this process, who is actually already in retirement. And so in some ways, he's already reached the point that a lot of us are kind of aiming at in our working life. And talking to someone who's already in retirement and reflecting on it, and what life looks like there, helped me see that even in retirement, we still need to have a purpose and some sort of idea of what our life is about and what we're doing with it. And then the third step, which is the last 6 questions, is really the planning, proper or per se, of looking ahead to the next year. 6 questions to take you through, like, just brainstorming, thinking about the next year, thinking ahead beyond that, 3, 5, 10 years, long horizon, but then eventually bringing it back down, screening those, different brainstormed ideas into a set of key results, things that I really want to focus on in the next year, and that will help organize my efforts and, frankly, prioritize and decide what makes the cut and what doesn't. What am I going to spend time on? And so that's what the year ahead really looks like, is these 12 questions that you answer. And so you can do it on your own as a workbook. And I would suggest not just one session, but multiple sessions, giving yourself 2, 3 hours, in maybe 1-hour blocks, maybe 45-minute blocks, but it's like, just spend some time writing it out. That's what I did in the month of December last year. And that's one way to do this program. A second way is the group, as we mentioned, and have other people processing, and that gives you a chance to see what it looks like in someone else's experience. And then you could do it intensively, individually, like hire me as a coach and just work on it as your own plan. So I hope that makes it a little bit clearer for people who are trying to get not just talking abstractly about this, but what is really involved.
When you ask me if, for feedback or what are the things I found missing, one of the things I found that we didn't have much conversation or questions on was the spiritual aspect of things. And so it made me want to do something like that with you together through Lead Skill or through Lead Skill, where we can offer something like that to the marketplace, where some leaders are not, further along in their journey. They are not trying to know the nuts and bolts of key results and goals, and they're not satisfied with just that aspect of their work. They want to delve further into the spirit side of things, and when I say spirit side, I'm not talking about religion or faith only. I'm talking about spirit. I'm talking about spirit. Like, how are you tending to your spirit? And what is spirit? Conversations like that. And I find that whether it's in group coaching or in private conversation with you and I, those are essential questions we can ask. Not say essential, those are essential questions to ask, and we can ask deep, thoughtful questions, and we can listen to the client process the whole thing. And I think it's in processing out loud that brings a lot of value to people who are in decision making, or who find themselves in solitary positions where they can't process some of these things out loud with the network or the people around them, but they want to have a totally different group of people, which is us, to listen and to tend to what matters to them.
Yeah. In fact, what you were mentioning about, spirit, that's one of the key parts about mindfulness meditation. In fact, I introduced that framework, the 6 steps, what we call breath. The last step, H, stands for heart, which is really the spirit. What you were talking about is, getting into what is the center of my energy, my spiritual core, what is it I'm about, and tuning into that part of myself, which is not so easily swayed or perturbed by the ups and downs of each day, but is our spirit, the place that we come from when we're being generous or gracious or thankful or tuning into like connection with other people or love. It's like, that's a good place for us to pay attention to. And yet I find a lot of leaders don't intentionally tune into that part of themselves. And that's one of the reasons why in mindfulness, it's really good to at least have that question or that waypoint, a check-in to see, how are you relating to your heart? Because frankly, when I wrote this book back in, 2006 or 2007, I became very aware that I was neglecting my heart on a regular basis, just wasn't even paying attention to it. And that I needed to give a lot more attention to my heart. So that's one of those sort of points of awareness that mindfulness made available to me.
And what?
Yeah, go ahead.
When I was working on the year ahead and all that, information, being able to answer the questions, and I said I'm still in the process of working on it. And what I found missing was my spirit. And like that was like the missing, so I was like, okay, so the questions may not be there, but it spurred something on for me. So I would describe the book and the conversations with you, it's like a catalyst, like a yeast that is necessary to make the bread rise, so I needed something to sort of springboard and create my next chapter. So
yeah. So, and that's a good thing. In fact, this year, one thing I'd like to do is for us together, you and I, to lead a course, maybe, a series of coaching sessions for people about writing their chapter, writing the next chapter, the life story part of it. Because we've talked about different levels of the personality on the Self-Aware Leader before. And one of the levels is kind of that personal narrative or your life story, where there's a richness to it. And I just recently in the past week read a friend of mine, her life story that she just published at the end of last year, and hopefully we'll have her on a future episode soon, and we can feature that book. But just taking time to write your life story is a very powerful process. Even if you don't publish it, even if no one else sees it, the mere act of doing it, I've done it, you've done it, and there's a lot of growth involved in that. The year ahead is a way to just write a chapter of that story. In fact, the next chapter before you live it. I'm forgetting where this came from, but maybe it was Stephen Covey who mentioned about there's two creations. You create something first in your mind before you actually create it in physical reality in the world.
Yes.
And the year ahead is like it's a scaffold. It helps us in that first creation. We create the year ahead that we want to see first in our mind and on paper, and then we go out and live it and create it in reality.
What I want to say is the things that you bring to the conversation, mindful conversation, the breath work, the EQ wheel you created, the book. I would think of you like you're like a master chef, where we have the dish, we have the entree, which is chicken, raw chicken, right? So we put all the different spices in there because I love to cook. I love to cook. So you put all the different spices and you have all these different, all your work is like the books and the exercises are like different spices and you make the dish.
Yeah.
So for me, when you talk about, writing the next chapter, like you and I, your knowledge that we have written our stories, but I used the year ahead to look at my habits. And, those are successful habits to bring your passion and your joy to work. But the intensity of how I do it is costly, it affects my health. And so it's for the year ahead and the next chapter of my life. If I am to create a new story and a new way of living and becoming more self-aware of my life, of who I want to be, and not do, and not do new drugs. I need to work on habits. I just love just the title, just a conversation, everything. Yeah. Every intelligent individual wants to know what makes him tick, and yet is at once fascinated and frustrated by the fact that oneself is the most difficult of all things to know. We're not meant to do alone. This is a great quote from Alan Watts, kind of again one more springboard to deeper conversations. And so I'm thankful that we are here, that I'm here with you on this journey to live a better life and have more simple daily joy.
I am too. And, I was trying to give some of the details here. We mentioned you can get the book on Amazon or on our website, leadskill.com. If you're interested in the coaching group, there's a link to that just now, and we'll put that in the description of this video if you're watching it on replay. So check out the description, the notes underneath the video. And if you want to go through this one-on-one with me coaching you, we can certainly do that too. And you can become a more self-aware leader in the process and get, some input that's real time, that helps you to forge, what is my year ahead? What is that going to look like? And we can talk through that. I was working with another guy one-on-one just in the past week. And, he was reflecting on that. He had gone through the whole, all 12 steps. But the part that really caught him was when he went back a second time at a little deeper level, those middle questions, 5 and 6, about looking inside and reflecting on who am I, really kind of shifted. And he said, man, it's like a whole mindset, change. And I see that the goals that I thought of for the coming year are like really inadequate. They're just too shallow. It's like they don't represent who I am and what my purpose is. And when I heard that, I was glad to know that he had had that moment of awareness and mindfulness that helped him, get to that little deeper level. And that's really what I'm going for. I'd say that's what's different about the year ahead from most programs that I've seen on the market, is this bringing mindfulness to the personal planning process and helping you have a greater clarity and also insight about who am I and what's my purpose and how can I live that out more fully in the plans that I'm making for the coming year.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today. And Angela, thank you for hosting with me and, just sharing from your own experience and, helping people not just hear me go on and on about it, but to think about, what this might look like for them. I really appreciate that. And I would encourage you, if you've been watching this, to check out the year ahead. $10, you can get a copy of the workbook. And if you want to do a coaching group or come through it individually with me, just sign up for that and you'll get a copy of the workbook thrown in. I mean, it's part of the whole service process. So happy to be of service and to work with people on clarifying their future direction. So the Self-Aware Leader, thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you in our future episodes. Take care.
Bye.